The morning mist clung to the Blue Ridge Mountains like a delicate veil, casting an ethereal glow over the sleepy town of Asheville, North Carolina. Ethan Callahan adjusted his work helmet as he made his way through the construction site, his boots crunching against the gravel. At 32, he had spent the last decade building other people's dreams while putting his own on hold. The cool mountain air filled his lungs as he prepared for another ordinary day, or so he thought. The symphony of construction sounds was suddenly interrupted by a different kind of noise. Through the cacophony of machinery and tools, Ethan heard something that made him pause, a distant whimper followed by a series of weak barks. His colleagues continued their work, oblivious to the sound, but something in those cries spoke directly to Ethan's heart. Following the sounds, he ventured beyond the construction site's perimeter, pushing through dense undergrowth. The morning dew soaked through his work clothes, but he pressed on, guided by an inexplicable urgency. After several minutes of searching, he found himself in a small clearing where time seemed to stand still. There, tied to an ancient oak tree with weathered nylon ropes, was a magnificent German shepherd. The dog's intelligent eyes met Ethan's, and in that moment, something profound passed between them. Despite its disheveled appearance, the animal maintained a dignified bearing that spoke of a noble past. Its fur, though matted and dirty, couldn't hide the powerful build underneath. Approaching cautiously, Ethan noticed something else. A worn leather collar with a small metal tube attached to it. The dog watched him intently, but remained calm, as if evaluating Ethan's intentions. This wasn't the behavior of a stray. This was a trained companion who had endured something extraordinary. "Hey there, buddy," Ethan spoke softly, extending his hand palm up. "What's your story?" To his amazement, the dog responded by lowering its head slightly, allowing Ethan to approach. With gentle movements, he worked to free the animal from its bonds. As he did so, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more than mere chance. Officer Ryan Dawson arrived 20 minutes later, his patrol car kicking up dust on the construction site's access road. Known throughout Asheville for his unwavering integrity, Ryan had earned the community's trust through years of dedicated service. As he approached the clearing, his trained eye immediately began cataloging details that others might miss. "Found him like this?" Ryan asked, crouching beside the dog, who remained remarkably composed. "Yes, and there's something else," Ethan replied, carefully removing the small metal tube from the collar. Inside, they found a carefully folded note that would change their lives forever. "His name is Rex. He's a hero. Keep him safe. The truth lies in the mountains." The cryptic message raised more questions than answers. Ryan examined the collar more closely, finding a faded military insignia that had almost worn away. The dog, Rex, watched the proceedings with an almost human-like understanding, his ears perking up at every word exchanged between the two men. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows through the trees, Ethan made a decision that would alter the course of his life. "I'll take him," he announced. "At least until we figure out what's going on." Ryan nodded thoughtfully, his police instincts telling him there was much more to this situation than abandoned pet. "I'll start looking into military connections," he said. "Something tells me Rex here is part of a much bigger story." That evening, as Ethan led Rex into his modest mountain cabin, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had stepped into something extraordinary. The dog moved through the space with careful precision, examining each room as if searching for something or someone. Later, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains, Rex's head suddenly snapped to attention, his ears forward and alert. In the distance, a figure moved through the trees, then quickly disappeared. Ethan leaned forward, straining to see through the gathering dusk, but whoever or whatever it was had vanished, leaving only questions in their wake. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. The following days brought more questions than answers. Rex had settled into Ethan's cabin with an ease that suggested he was accustomed to mountain living. Each morning, the German Shepherd would stand at the kitchen window, his gaze fixed on the distant peaks as if they held secrets only he could understand. Ethan noticed something remarkable about Rex's behavior. The dog seemed to be protecting him. Whenever someone approached the cabin, Rex would position himself between Ethan and the door, not aggressively, but with purposeful vigilance. It was as if the dog had been trained not just to guard, but to assess and analyze potential threats. One particular morning, while preparing for work, Ethan discovered something unusual. Rex had been pawing at a loose floorboard near the fireplace, his actions deliberate and insistent. When Ethan investigated, he found an old photograph that must have belonged to the cabin's previous owner. The image showed a military compound nestled in a landscape that looked strikingly similar to the surrounding mountains. Officer Ryan Dawson's investigation had yielded interesting results. The military insignia on Rex's collar matched a specialized K9 unit that had operated in the area 5 years ago. However, all official records of the unit seemed to have vanished, as if deliberately erased. "There's something else," Ryan said during his visit to the cabin. "I've been asking around about military dogs in the area. A woman at the local Veterans Center mentioned a handler named Daniel Carter. Apparently, he and his dog disappeared under mysterious circumstances years ago. The official story was that they were relocated, but nobody seems to know where." As Ryan spoke, Rex's ears perked up at the mention of Daniel Carter's name. The dog's reaction didn't go unnoticed by either man. Ethan reached for the photograph he'd found. Could this be connected? Before Ryan could respond, a knock at the door startled them. Through the window, they saw an elegant woman in her 50s, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Rex's reaction was unexpected. Instead of his usual protective stance, he wagged his tail and whined softly. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," she announced when they opened the door. "I worked as a military nurse at the mountain facility." Her eyes fixed on Rex, filling with tears. "I never thought I'd see him again." Sarah's presence seemed to unlock something in Rex. The dog approached her carefully, accepting her gentle pat with familiar ease. "There's so much you need to know," she continued, her voice trembling. "But we have to be careful. The mountains have ears, and there are people who would prefer if certain truths remained buried." Inside the cabin, Sarah revealed that she had been part of a classified research program that worked with specially trained dogs. These weren't ordinary military K9s. They were part of something far more extraordinary. Rex had been their star pupil, demonstrating abilities that defied conventional explanation. "Daniel Carter was Rex's handler," Sarah explained, watching the dog who now sat alertly at her feet. "He discovered something during their training, something that made powerful people very uncomfortable. He tried to protect Rex by hiding him in these mountains." As she spoke, Rex suddenly stood up, his attention drawn to the window. Outside, the mountain mist had begun to roll in, thick and mysterious. Through the fog, a shadow moved, too deliberate to be an animal, too cautious to be a casual hiker. Sarah's face paled. "They're still watching," she whispered, clutching her handbag closer. "I've said too much already, but Rex—" She turned to the dog, her eyes filled with purpose. "Rex knows where to find the proof. He just needs someone brave enough to follow where he leads." The shadow outside disappeared into the mist, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with unspoken revelations. Ethan and Ryan exchanged glances, understanding that they had stumbled into something far bigger than a simple case of an abandoned dog. Whatever secrets lay hidden in these mountains, Rex was the key to uncovering them. The morning after Sarah Mitchell's visit, Rex's behavior changed dramatically. The German shepherd paced restlessly by the door, his attention focused on the mountain trail leading away from Ethan's cabin. There was an urgency in his movements that couldn't be ignored. "He wants us to follow him," Ethan said to Ryan, who had arrived early, armed with new information about the mysterious military facility. The fog had lifted, revealing a crystal-clear autumn day, perfect for mountain exploration. Sarah's revelations about Rex's special training had left them with more questions than answers. What exactly had Daniel Carter discovered, and why were these abilities so threatening to powerful people? The photograph of the military compound weighed heavily in Ethan's pocket as they began their ascent into the mountains, following Rex's confident lead. The dog moved with purpose, occasionally stopping to ensure his human companions kept pace. 3 hours into their trek, they reached a section of the mountain that tourists never visited. The terrain became rougher, and the trail all but disappeared. Rex led them to what appeared to be a solid rock face, covered in thick vegetation. "There's nothing here," Ryan said, catching his breath. But Rex disagreed. The dog began pawing at the vegetation, revealing glimpses of metal underneath. Closer inspection showed it was a door, masterfully concealed by years of natural growth. "This isn't on any official map," Ryan muttered, examining the rusted hinges. With combined effort, they managed to push the door open, revealing a narrow passage leading into the mountain. The air that rushed out was stale, but not unpleasant, suggesting some form of ventilation system was still functioning. Inside, their flashlights revealed a sophisticated facility that time had forgotten. Dust-covered equipment lined the walls, and faded photographs showed teams of handlers working with various dogs. But it was the research papers scattered across the desks that caught their attention. Project Sentinel, Ethan read from one of the less damaged documents. They were developing a program to enhance canine cognitive abilities. "Look at these test results. They're extraordinary." The papers detailed experiments that pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. The dogs in the program had demonstrated unprecedented levels of intelligence, problem-solving abilities, and even what the researchers called enhanced intuitive capabilities. Rex had been their most successful subject, showing abilities that bordered on the supernatural. As they delved deeper into the facility, Rex's behavior became increasingly animated. He led them to a specific office where a hidden safe lay exposed behind a fallen filing cabinet. The dog sat in front of it, looking expectantly at Ethan. "Sarah mentioned that Rex knows where to find the proof," Ethan remembered. "But how do we open it?" The answer came from an unexpected source. While examining the safe, Ryan noticed something unusual about Rex's collar. A series of numbers had been scratched into the metal tube that had held the original note, so faint they were almost invisible. "It's a combination," Ryan realized. The numbers matched the style of military security protocols he'd seen before. With trembling fingers, he input the sequence. The safe opened with a satisfying click. Inside, they found a leather-bound journal and a set of data drives. The journal belonged to Daniel Carter, and its first entry sent chills down their spines. "What we've achieved here is miraculous, but the price of progress cannot be measured in dollars. Some capabilities should remain in nature's hands alone." "They don't understand. These aren't just dogs anymore." Before they could read further, Rex suddenly tensed, his ears forward and alert. In the distance, they heard the unmistakable sound of vehicles approaching on the mountain road. Someone else knew about this facility, and they were coming to investigate. "We need to move," Ryan urged, quickly gathering the journal and drives. "If Sarah was right about people wanting to keep this secret, we can't be found here." As they hurried through the complex, Rex's training became evident. The dog guided them to a secondary exit, one that wouldn't have been obvious to casual observers. The passage led them through a series of natural caves before emerging on a different face of the mountain. Looking back, they could see dust rising from the main road, multiple vehicles approaching the hidden facility. But thanks to Rex's guidance, they were already moving in a different direction, deeper into the mountain wilderness where their pursuers wouldn't think to look. The journal in Ryan's backpack held answers they desperately wanted to understand. But for now, their priority was putting distance between themselves and whoever was so interested in this abandoned facility. Rex led the way with unwavering confidence, proving with every step that he was far more than just a highly trained military dog. Safe in Ethan's cabin as evening fell, they began to examine Daniel Carter's journal. Rex lay at their feet, his eyes never leaving the leather-bound book as Ryan carefully turned its pages. Sarah Mitchell had joined them, her medical expertise proving invaluable in deciphering the technical terminology scattered throughout the entries. The Sentinel project wasn't just about training military dogs, Sarah explained, pointing to specific passages. They were studying what they called evolutionary leaps in canine intelligence. Some of the dogs, especially Rex, showed abilities that went far beyond traditional training. Daniel's journal entries painted a picture of a program that had stumbled upon something extraordinary. The dogs in the program had developed abilities that defied conventional explanation. They could anticipate events before they happened, locate hidden objects without any sensory clues, and even demonstrate what appeared to be telepathic connections with their handlers. "Listen to this entry," Ethan read aloud. "Rex's abilities have progressed beyond anything we imagined. Today, he led us to a lost hiker 2 miles away through dense forest with no prior knowledge of the person's location. But it's more than just enhanced senses. He knew the hiker needed help before any distress call was made." Sarah nodded solemnly. Daniel discovered that these abilities weren't artificial enhancements. They were natural capabilities that had somehow been awakened. The project had inadvertently tapped into something that had been dormant in canines for thousands of years. As they read further, the true reason for Daniel's disappearance began to emerge. He had realized that some project leaders wanted to push the experiments into dangerous territory, refusing to accept the ethical boundaries he tried to establish. They wanted to replicate the results through artificial means, regardless of the cost to the animals involved. "There's something else," Ryan said, carefully removing a folded paper tucked into the journal's back cover. It was a map of the mountain range, with several locations marked in red ink. "These must be important places. Look, they're all connected to geological features, underground springs, magnetic anomalies." Rex suddenly stood, walking to the window with focused attention. Outside, the mountain peaks were bathed in moonlight, their silhouettes sharp against the star-filled sky. The dog's behavior suggested he recognized something in those markings. Sarah studied the map intently. Daniel believed there was a connection between these natural features and the dog's enhanced abilities. He theorized that certain places in these mountains acted as amplifiers for abilities that all dogs possess to some degree. Ethan remembered how Rex had led them to the hidden facility with such certainty. That's why the project was located here, because of these natural features. "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. But Daniel discovered something else, something that made him realize the project had to be stopped. The last entry in his journal mentions a hidden chamber, a place where the mountain's energy was strongest. He called it the Sanctuary. As if responding to the word, Rex moved to the door, his entire body tense with anticipation. Through the window, they could see clouds gathering around the highest peaks, despite the clear sky everywhere else. The mountains seemed to be calling to them. "Daniel's final entry," Ryan read, his voice hushed with reverence. "The truth isn't in what we've done to these dogs. It's in what they've shown us about ourselves. We thought we were enhancing them, but they were trying to teach us something far more important. The mountains hold ancient secrets, and Rex has shown me that some mysteries should remain sacred. The implications of Daniel's words hung heavy in the room. Rex had returned to Ethan's side, placing his head on his lap with an almost human-like expression of understanding. The dog wasn't just a subject of the project, he was a guardian of something far more significant. Sarah broke the contemplative silence. Tomorrow at dawn, Rex will guide us to the sanctuary, but we need to be careful. The people who want to exploit these discoveries are still out there, and they won't stop until they get what they want. As if to emphasize her warning, a distant rumble of thunder rolled through the mountains. Rex's ears perked up, his gaze fixed on the highest peak visible from the window. Whatever secrets lay hidden in the sanctuary, they were about to discover why some truths were worth protecting at any cost. Dawn painted the mountains in shades of purple and gold as the small group began their ascent. Rex led the way with unwavering certainty, following a path that seemed to exist only in his extraordinary mind. Ethan, Ryan, and Sarah followed, their backpacks loaded with supplies and Daniel's precious journal. The morning mist clung to the mountainside, creating an otherworldly atmosphere that matched the gravity of their mission. Rex would occasionally stop, his head tilted as if listening to voices only he could hear. Each time he did this, the group noticed strange phenomena, unexplained wind patterns, unusual bird behaviors, and mysterious echoes that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The indigenous people who lived here centuries ago believed these mountains were sacred, Sarah explained as they climbed. They spoke of places where the veil between worlds was thinner, where animals could communicate with humans more directly. Everyone dismissed these as legends, but now... Her voice trailed off as Rex suddenly stopped, his attention fixed on a rocky outcropping ahead. The formation seemed ordinary enough, but as they approached, they noticed unusual crystalline patterns in the stone that seemed to pulse with a faint, bluish light. "It's exactly as Daniel described in his later journal entries," Sarah whispered, touching the rock surface reverently. He called them resonance points, places where the mountain's natural energy concentrates. Rex pressed forward, leading them through a series of increasingly narrow passages. The air grew thick with an electric charge that made their skin tingle. Their electronic devices began malfunctioning, phones losing signal, compasses spinning wildly. Only Rex seemed unaffected, moving with purposeful grace through the mysterious landscape. Suddenly, they emerged into a hidden valley nestled high in the mountains. The sight before them took their breath away. Ancient stone circles, clearly man-made but weathered by centuries, stood in concentric patterns. In the center, a natural spring bubbled up from the ground, its water catching the morning light in impossible ways. "The sanctuary," Sarah breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Daniel found it, but he knew it had to be protected. This is why he disappeared. He became its guardian. Rex moved to the center of the stone circles, and something extraordinary happened. The dog's presence seemed to activate the space. The air shimmered with an invisible energy, and the spring's waters began to pulse with a soft, rhythmic glow. The dog turned to look at them, his eyes reflecting an ancient wisdom that transcended his training. It's not just about enhanced abilities, Ethan realized, watching Rex. The project accidentally discovered something that's been here all along. A connection between nature, animals, and humans that we've forgotten. As if in response to his words, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows of a nearby cave. Daniel Carter, older but very much alive, stepped into the morning light. Rex bounded to his former handler, their reunion a testament to the unbreakable bond they shared. "I knew Rex would bring the right people here eventually," Daniel said, his voice rough from lack of use. "This place, it's not meant to be controlled or studied. It's meant to remind us of what we've lost in our rush for progress. but their moment of revelation was interrupted by the distant sound of helicopters. Sarah's face paled. "They've followed us. The people who wanted to exploit the project's discoveries. They must have tracked our movement up the mountain." Daniel remained calm, sharing a knowing look with Rex. "Don't worry," he said with quiet confidence. "The sanctuary protects itself. Rex and I have learned that there are forces in these mountains far more powerful than any human agenda." The helicopter sounds grew closer, but something strange began to happen. The mist around the valley thickened impossibly fast, creating a natural barrier that no aircraft could penetrate safely. Rex stood at the center of the stone circles, his posture regal and powerful, somehow connected to the mountain's mysterious defense. Ethan, Ryan, and Sarah watched in awe as the sanctuary demonstrated why it had remained hidden for so long. The helicopter's sounds became confused, circling aimlessly before retreating. Nature itself seemed to be conspiring to keep this sacred place secret. Daniel turned to them, his eyes filled with purpose. "Now you understand why this place must remain protected. The real question is, are you ready to become part of its story? Because once you accept this responsibility, your lives will never be the same." The group stood in the ancient stone circles, surrounded by mountains that suddenly seemed more alive than ever before. Rex moved between them, touching each person gently, as if anointing them as new guardians of this ancient secret. The choice before them was momentous: to return to their normal lives or to become part of something far greater than themselves. The decision to become guardians of the sanctuary wasn't just about protecting a place, it was about preserving a truth that the modern world had forgotten. As the morning sun climbed higher, Daniel led the group deeper into the sanctuary's mysteries, with Rex always by his side. The project's leaders thought they were enhancing dogs like Rex, Daniel explained, gesturing to the ancient stone circles. But what they really discovered was that these abilities were always there, dormant in all dogs. This place, these mountains, they're like a key that unlocks what's been sleeping for centuries. Sarah approached one of the stone markers, her scientific mind struggling to reconcile what she knew with what she was witnessing. The research data was only scratching the surface. "We were measuring things like enhanced perception and intelligence, but this," she gestured to Rex, who was moving through the circles with practiced familiarity, "this is something our instruments could never quantify." Ethan watched as Rex demonstrated abilities that defied explanation. The dog could anticipate their thoughts, respond to unspoken questions, and seem to communicate with the very essence of the mountain itself. The construction worker who had once built structures of concrete and steel now understood that the most magnificent architectures were those crafted by nature itself. "The indigenous peoples who once lived here," Ryan mused, "they must have known about this place. They understood something we've lost. That animals aren't just our companions, they're our teachers." Daniel nodded, a peaceful smile crossing his weathered face. "That's why I had to protect this place." The project leaders wanted to replicate these abilities artificially, to create some kind of super canine program. They couldn't understand that what makes this special isn't something you can manufacture or control. The sanctuary hummed with ancient energy as Rex led them to the central spring. The water sparkled with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with their heartbeats. Each droplet contained reflections of memories, not just their own, but those of countless guardians who had come before them. "The choice you make today," Daniel continued, "isn't just about keeping a secret, it's about becoming part of a legacy that stretches back through time. The sanctuary needs protectors who understand that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be experienced and cherished." As if responding to his words, Rex moved to each person in turn, touching them gently with his nose. With each contact, they felt a deep connection not just to the dog, but to the mountains themselves. The barrier between human and animal consciousness seemed to dissolve, revealing a deeper truth about their shared existence on Earth. Sarah was the first to speak. "I'll stay," she declared. "My research led me here, but now I understand that some knowledge isn't meant for laboratories and scientific papers. It's meant to be protected and passed down through direct experience." Ryan stepped forward next. "As a police officer, I've sworn to protect and serve. I never imagined that oath would extend to something like this, but I can't think of anything more important to protect." Ethan looked at Rex, remembering that first morning when he heard the dog's cries at the construction site. "Everything in my life has led to this moment," he realized. "All those years, building houses for other people, I was really preparing to become a guardian of this sacred place." The mountain mist swirled around them as they made their commitments, and the sanctuary seemed to respond. The ancient stones hummed with renewed energy, accepting these new guardians into their ageless fellowship. Rex moved to the center of the circles, his bearing both regal and humble, a bridge between the modern world and ancient wisdom. Daniel smiled, seeing his own journey reflected in these new protectors. "The sanctuary has chosen well," he said. Through Rex, it found people whose hearts were ready to understand its truth. Now our real work begins, not just protecting this place, but helping others remember what we've forgotten about our connection to the natural world. As the sun reached its zenith, the group stood together in the ancient stone circles, their lives forever transformed. Rex moved between them, a living symbol of the bridge between worlds. The mystery that had begun with the abandoned dog in the mountains had become something far greater, a reminder that the most profound truths often come to us not through conquest or control, but through the simple act of opening our hearts to the wisdom that surrounds us. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the tale of Rex and the Sanctuary has touched your hearts and reminded you of the magical bond between humans and animals. We've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about the mysterious connections between nature and humanity. Find it by clicking the link to your left. If you enjoyed this journey into the heart of the mountains, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore life's deepest mysteries. Join our community in the comment section below. We'd love to hear about your own magical encounters with animals and nature. Until our next adventure.